The train was never meant to stop. It carried ammunition, fuel, medical supplies, and sealed orders stamped in red ink. Its destination was the Eastern Front. Its schedule was precise to the minute. And yet, in the winter of 1943, it vanished. Not destroyed, not derailed, not captured. Simply gone. The railway line cut through a region no one talked about anymore. Forests so dense they swallowed sound. Villages abandoned so completely that even ruins had begun to disappear. Snow fell constantly, smoothing everything into the same color. The locals called it the Quiet Belt. Trains passed through it fast. Or they didn't pass at all. Ivan Morozov was not a soldier. He was a railway dispatcher. 47 years old. Bent spine. Hands permanently stained with oil and ink. He had memorized schedules the way priests memorize prayers. Before the war, he believed trains were honest. They followed rules. They followed tracks. The war changed that. The orders arrived at midnight. Train 914. Priority read, no stops. No delays. No radio contact except at approved points. Ivan noticed the detail immediately. There was no approved point listed for the Quiet Belt. He hesitated, then signed. Because hesitation had become dangerous. The train entered the forest at 0312. Its lights cut a narrow path through falling snow. The engineer reported normal conditions. Speed steady. Tracks clear. At 0319, the signal went dead. No explosion. No emergency code. No final transmission. Just silence. By morning, command demanded answers. Reconnaissance planes saw nothing. The tracks showed no damage. No smoke, no wreckage. Train 914 had simply existing. Ivan was questioned. He told them the truth. That line is wrong, he said. It's old, too old. The war never fixed it. They laughed. Then they arrested him. 2 days later, the train returned. It rolled into the nearest station at dusk. Slow, perfectly aligned. Lights on, every carriage intact, every seal unbroken. The engineer sat frozen in his seat. Dead, not burned, not shot, not wounded, his eyes were open, and his hands were gripping the controls as if he had never stopped driving. They opened the cargo cars. Everything was there, except the soldiers. 2 platoons had been assigned to escort the train. Their rifles were stacked neatly, their boots lined in rows, their coats folded, no blood, no signs of struggle, just absence. Ivan was brought back. They made him walk the length of the train. Explain, an officer demanded. Ivan touched the metal. It was cold. Too cold. This train never reached the front, he said quietly. It reached somewhere else. The orders came quickly. The line was to be closed. The Quiet Belt declared restricted. All records sealed. But war does not respect restrictions. 3 weeks later, another train was scheduled. Different number, different cargo. Same line. Ivan did not sleep that night. Because he remembered something his father had once told him. During the First War, before borders changed, before maps were redrawn, this forest, his father said, does not like being crossed. At dawn, Ivan did something unforgivable. He altered the schedule. Just one detail. He added a stop that did not officially exist. Train 927 entered the Quiet Belt at 001. And this time, Ivan followed it. Ivan Morozov boarded the train at dawn. Not as a dispatcher, not as a witness. As a mistake that had decided to walk forward instead of waiting to be erased. Train 927 smelled wrong. Metal usually carried familiar scents. Oil. Old heat trapped in iron. This train smelled of cold wood and snow as if the forest had already claimed it. The engineer Pavel Kuznetsov barely looked at Ivan when he climbed into the cabin. "You are not listed," Pavel said. "I added myself," Ivan replied. Pavel did not ask how. He only nodded once. Men who had survived long enough in war learned when questions were dangerous. They crossed the last active signal tower at 0358. Green light, clear track, normal pressure. At 0401, the Quiet Belt began. The forest closed around the rails immediately. Trees pressed close, branches heavy with snow, blocking the sky. The sound of the engine changed, as if the air itself had thickened. Ivan checked his watch. It was still ticking. That felt important. 0407, Pavel frowned. Speed unchanged, he muttered. But we are slowing. The gauge disagreed. The rails disagreed. Only the feeling told the truth. They were moving forward and not advancing. The first abandoned village appeared at 0412. Ivan recognized it, or thought he did. Houses leaned inward, roofs collapsed under years of snow. No smoke. No sound. Then he saw something impossible. A light, one window glowed faintly yellow. Pulse-load the train without being told. You see it too, he said. Ivan nodded. The schedule did not include villages. It never had. The train stopped on its own, brakes untouched, pressure steady. Silence followed. Deep, total, even the forest stopped moving. Someone knocked on the side of the engine, once, slowly. Ivan's breath caught. Pavel reached for his pistol but did not raise it. The knocking came again. Light, measured, as if whoever stood outside understood rules. Ivan opened the cabin door. Cold rushed in like water. A man stood on the snow-covered ground, wearing a railway uniform older than any Ivan had seen. Dark wool, brass buttons dulled by decades, no insignia. His face was pale but not dead. Tickets, the man said calmly. Ivan stared. This is a military transport. The man nodded. All trains are, he replied. Eventually. Behind him, more figures emerged from the forest. Men, women, some in civilian coats, some in uniforms from different years. None of them left footprints. Pavel whispered, "We should not be stopped." The conductor smiled faintly. "No one stops," he said. "Some arrive." The soldiers guarding the first cargo car rushed forward, rifles raised. They shouted. They demanded identification. The figures did not react. Then the forest exhaled. The sound was not loud. It was heavy, like earth settling. One soldier dropped his rifle. Another fell to his knees, hands pressed to his ears. Ivan felt pressure behind his eyes, memories surfacing without invitation. The sound stopped. 5 soldiers were gone, not fallen, not dragged, gone. Their weapons lay where they had stood. The conductor stepped closer to Ivan. "You changed the schedule," he said. Ivan swallowed. "Yes, that was considerate." "What is this place?" Ivan asked. The conductor looked toward the trees. "This is where lines go when they are no longer needed." The train moved again. Not forward. Sideways. The forest shifted, revealing rails that had not existed moments before. Rusted, narrower, old. Ivan looked back. The original track was gone. They passed through darkness that was not night. Time behaved strangely here. Ivan's watch ticked, but the hands did not always agree with the ticking. Breath steamed, then did not. They reached a clearing filled with trains, dozens of them. Hundreds. Different eras, different designs, some burned, some pristine. All silent. Pavel whispered, "How many never reached the front?" Ivan did not answer. He already knew. They disembarked. The soldiers followed, weapons uselessly raised. A bell rang somewhere. The conductor raised his hand. "Cargo will be processed," he announced. "What does that mean?" a lieutenant demanded. The conductor met his eyes. "It means the war will not receive it." Figures approached the cargo cars. When doors opened, the contents remained untouched. Supplies, ammunition, medicine. Only people were taken. Gently, without force. Some soldiers resisted. They were not punished. They were simply removed from time. Ivan felt something brush his sleeve. A boy stood beside him, no older than 18, wearing a uniform that did not belong to this war. "Did we win?" the boy asked. Ivan could not answer. The boy nodded anyway and walked into the trees. The conductor returned. "You may leave," he told Ivan. "Why?" Ivan asked. "Because you noticed," the man replied. "And because someone must remember where trains go when they are taken off the map." The engine restarted. Ivan and Pavel were the only ones aboard now. As the train rolled back into the forest, Ivan looked back. The clearing was already fading, rails dissolving into snow. Silence sealing itself. They exited the quiet belt at 0401, exactly the same minute they had entered. The signal tower blinked green. Everything normal, The train arrived empty. Again, Pavel resigned that day and never spoke of it. Ivan returned to his desk. But he began to receive requests, quiet ones, unofficial ones, trains that needed to be delayed, redirected, forgotten. Because somewhere in the forest the quiet belt waited, and it had learned Ivan's name. Once something is noticed, it cannot be unseen. The quiet belt had existed for decades, maybe longer, ignored because it did not interfere often enough to matter. But now there were reports, empty trains, missing men, cargo untouched, timetables that returned clean as if nothing had happened. Command did not call it supernatural. They called it a logistics anomaly, and anomalies invite exploitation. A special committee was formed, rail officers, engineers, military planners. Ivan Morozov was not invited. He was summoned. They did not accuse him. Not yet. They asked him to explain the forest, the conductor, the missing soldiers. Ivan said only what could be said. The line decides, he told them. Not us. They laughed. Then they ordered a test. Train 1032 was prepared carefully. No soldiers. No weapons. Only sealed cargo and one observer. A captain with a notebook and a pistol. Ivan altered nothing. The train entered the quiet belt at 0244. At 0244, it exited. No delay. No distortion. No disappearance. The captain reported nothing unusual. The committee relaxed. Ivan did not. Because the line had noticed restraint. The second test ignored restraint. Train 1033 carried prisoners. Not officially, not recorded. Men who were no longer useful. The train did not exit. It returned at dawn. The cars were clean. The notebook lay on the floor of the engine cabin, open to the last page. One sentence was written in unfamiliar handwriting. Do not load us with what you wish to erase. The committee disbanded quietly, but war does not learn from warnings. It learns from repetition. Word spread through unofficial channels. Somewhere, there was a line that swallowed men and equipment. A line that removed problems without leaving evidence. Someone gave it a name. The Vanishing Line. By early 1944, requests arrived from higher up, not written orders, verbal suggestions. Could the line delay an offensive? Could it reroute enemy supply? Could it make certain trains disappear? Ivan refused. They replaced him. The new dispatcher altered the schedule himself. He added 6 trains in 1 week. All military, all urgent, the quiet belt answered. The first train vanished completely. The second returned empty. The third never appeared on radar. The fourth derailed miles away from the forest, as if the tracks themselves had rejected it. The fifth stopped before entering the belt. Brakes locked permanently, metal fused like it had aged 100 years in minutes. The sixth did not exist by the time anyone checked. Rail lines across the region began misbehaving. Switches changed position without command. Signals showed green and red at the same time. Timetables corrected themselves overnight. Engineers blamed sabotage. There was none. Ivan was called back. Not as an employee, as a translator. You understand it, an officer said. Make it cooperate. Ivan looked at the map. The quiet belt was no longer a single line. It had spread, small deviations, unscheduled sidings, loops that were not there before. You are not negotiating with a tool, Ivan said. You are being judged by a habit. The final attempt came quietly. A single train, no cargo, no passengers, just an engine. They wanted to see what the line would do and offered nothing. The engine entered at midnight. It stopped in the forest, then moved backward, not along the track. Off it. The rails bent to follow. Ivan watched from the signal tower. The forest shifted. The line redrew itself. He understood then. The quiet belt was not reacting anymore. It was correcting. From that night on, the region's rail network became unreliable. Trains arrived early or late by the same impossible margin. Routes shortened without explanation. Detours appeared, then vanished. The war lost its rhythm. Command issued a final directive. The quiet belt was to be destroyed. Bombing, clear-cutting, rerouting, erase the forest, erase the line. Ivan submitted his resignation. It was ignored, because the line had already made its decision. The bombing began before sunrise. Not a warning strike, not reconnaissance. Erasure. Artillery batteries fired blindly into the forest. Bombers dropped their payloads along the suspected rail corridor. Trees were torn apart, earth lifted and folded back to itself, snow turned black and steaming. From the air, it looked successful. From the ground, nothing changed. Ivan Morozov stood inside the signal tower and watched the instruments lie. Seismic readings spiked, then smoothed themselves out. Power lines flickered, then stabilized. The main track map showed damage, then corrected its own alignment. As if the paper itself disagreed with reality, the quiet belt absorbed the violence. Not by resisting, by redirecting. Ground troops were sent in next. Engineers, infantry, surveyors with flags and measuring tools. Their orders were simple. Locate the anomaly. Mark the line. Destroy the rails. They entered the forest in formation. They did not return in formation. The first platoon reported disorientation within minutes. Compasses spun. Distances stretched. 100 meters became a kilometer. Voices echoed from the wrong direction. Then the reports stopped. Search teams followed. They found the platoon's equipment neatly stacked beside the rails. No bodies, no blood, no sign of struggle. The snow was undisturbed. Ivan was brought to the forward command post. The officer in charge placed a map on the table. "Show us where it is," he said. Ivan did not touch the map. "It moves," he replied. "You don't find it, you're admitted." The officer laughed once. Then he stopped laughing. That night, the forest advanced. Not physically, logistically. Rail switches kilometers away began locking into positions that funneled trains toward the quiet belt. Backup routes failed inspections for reasons that made no sense. Supply delays stacked on top of each other. The war machine began to stutter. Desperation followed. They tried fire. Flamethrowers were deployed, burning corridors through the forest, melting snow and bark alike. The smoke rose thick and heavy. By morning, the burned paths were gone. New growth stood where ash had been. Too fast. Too uniform. Ivan was no longer watched. He was avoided. Men sensed that proximity to him mattered, that the line listened through him even if he said nothing. He spent his nights alone in the tower, listening to rails hum softly under moonlight. They were not carrying trains. They were carrying decisions. The next order was final. A full troop transport would be sent through the quiet belt. Not to test it, to overwhelm it. If enough men entered at once, something would break. Either the line, or reality. Ivan begged them not to. He was ignored. The train departed at 0130. 3 engines. 12 cars. Over 600 men. No cargo. Only intent. The forest accepted them. Calmly. At the midpoint the train slowed, then stopped. The radios went dead simultaneously. Witnesses later said the trees leaned inward, not physically, but perceptually, as if attention itself had weight. The soldiers disembarked. They did not panic. They followed the rails instructed. Then the rails split. Not into 2 paths. Into many. Each leading in a slightly different direction. Orders conflicted. Shouts overlapped. Units separated. The forest listened and sorted. By dawn, the train was gone. The tracks were clean. 600 men had been redistributed, not killed, removed from the war's accounting. The command post collapsed into chaos. Accusations, arrests, denials. Someone ordered Ivan detained permanently. Before the order could be carried out, the signal tower received a transmission. Unscheduled, clear, local. Ivan recognized the tone immediately. The conductor. "You have pushed too hard," the voice said. "You have mistaken capacity for permission." Ivan closed his eyes. "What do you want?" he asked. There was a pause. Then, less. That afternoon the quiet belt receded. Not vanished. Contained. Trains no longer diverted automatically. The spread halted. The line stabilized into a single corridor again. The war resumed its terrible rhythm. But something fundamental had changed. Ivan was released quietly. No apology. No explanation. He returned to his post. quieter. Certain, the forest had not been defeated. It had issued terms. And for the first time in the war, those terms had been accepted. Once the quiet belt stopped spreading, command made a fatal assumption. That containment meant control. They stopped trying to destroy the line. Instead, they began to use it quietly, the way one uses poison, sparingly, secretly, always denying its existence. No official documents mentioned it. No maps showed it. No orders were written. Everything was verbal. Ivan Morozov noticed the change immediately. Trains began arriving at his desk that did not belong to any schedule. Numbers out of sequence. Cargo listed vaguely. Destinations marked only with time, never place. And always the same phrase, spoken softly by officers who avoided his eyes. This one should not return. The first train sent this way carried prisoners, not enemies, not criminals. Soldiers who talked too much. Officers who failed too often. Men who had become inconvenient. Ivan refused to adjust the schedule. Someone else did. The train entered the quiet belt at 0210. It did not return. No empty cars. No equipment stacked neatly. Nothing. The line had not processed the train. It had rejected the intent. That night, Ivan heard the rails hum louder than ever before. Not angry, disappointed. The next attempt was more careful. A train carrying obsolete weapons, damaged artillery, broken machinery. Nothing human. The quiet belt accepted it. The train returned empty within minutes. Clean, neutral, silent. Command smiled. They thought they had learned the rules. Soon, requests escalated. A delayed offensive needed time. A supply failure needed explanation. A missing unit needed to be erased from records without scandal. The quiet belt was no longer an anomaly. It was becoming a procedure. Ivan watched men convince themselves this was efficiency. He said nothing, because the line was listening. The breaking point came with Train 611. Officially, it carried replacement uniforms. Unofficially, it carried a battalion ordered to reinforce a collapsing front. Fresh recruits, young, loud, still believing in arrival. Someone altered the manifest after Ivan signed it. They added people. The train entered the quiet belt at dawn. Ivan felt it before any report came in. The rails screamed, not audibly. Internally, like metal under strain, the train returned, all cars present, all doors open, uniforms folded inside, no men. This time, something was different. Written on the inside of the engine cabin door, carved deep into steel, were words Ivan had never seen before. We do not erase those who are still going somewhere. Panic followed. Quiet panic. Meetings behind closed doors. Files burned. Names crossed out and rewritten. Someone suggested removing Ivan permanently. Someone else suggested that doing so might anger the line. Ivan was left alone. Again, that night, the conductor returned. Not by radio, by presence. Ivan found him standing beside the tracks, snow untouched beneath his boots. You are allowing misuse? The conductor said calmly. Ivan did not argue. I am not in control, he replied. The conductor nodded. Neither are they. The rules changed after that. The quiet belts stopped responding predictably. Sometimes trains vanished completely. Sometimes they returned unchanged. Sometimes they never entered at all, stopping meters before the forest as if blocked by an invisible wall. Intent mattered now more than cargo. A final, catastrophic order was issued without Ivan's involvement. A retreating division was to be sent through the quiet belt to avoid encirclement, not erased. Saved. They believed the line would help. The train never reached the forest, the rails bent away from it. The engine derailed gently as if guided aside. The division survived. The front collapsed anyway. Ivan understood. The quiet belt was not a weapon. It was a filter. It did not serve war. It corrected it. The conductor appeared one last time. The line will close. Not disappear. Close. What happens to those still inside? Ivan asked. They will arrive, the conductor replied. Just not where they intended. Within weeks, the quiet belt fell silent. No diversions, no disappearances, no anomalies, The rails became ordinary again. Too ordinary. The war ended months later. Ivan survived, older, forgotten, unrewarded. He kept one thing, a copy of a timetable that no longer matched any map. Years later, after borders shifted and names changed, a young railway engineer asked Ivan a question. Did the quiet belt really exist? Ivan looked at the tracks stretching into the distance. Yes, he said. It still does. Where? Ivan smiled faintly. Wherever a train is sent with the wrong reason. That night, far from any forest, a freight train stopped inexplicably on an empty plain and waited. After the war, maps were redrawn. Borders shifted. Stations were renamed. Rail networks were rebuilt with new steel and new rules. Schedules became cleaner. Technology replaced intuition. And officially, the quiet belt never existed. Ivan Morozov retired quietly. No ceremony, no pension worthy of notice. Just a final stamp on a document and a desk cleared by someone who did not know his name. He moved to a small apartment near a secondary line that carried freight at night. He slept lightly, always listening. Some habits do not leave. Years passed without incident. Then a derailment occurred. No explosion, no collision. A train simply stopped on a straight section of track and tipped gently onto its side as if laid down. The cargo was intact. The crew survived. Investigators blamed metal fatigue. Ivan shook his head. More incidents followed. Different countries, different decades, always the same pattern. Trains carrying weapons arriving late. Convoys transporting prisoners diverted without explanation. Emergency shipments forced to stop just long enough for consequences to change. Never dramatic. Always precise. Rail engineers began sharing stories, quietly, off record, about switches that locked when orders felt wrong, about signals that refused to turn green, about tracks that vibrated underfoot when certain cargo passed over them. Someone joked about haunted rails. No one laughed for long. Ivan was interviewed once. A historian. Curious. Careful. Do you believe infrastructure can make decisions? She asked. Ivan looked out the window at a passing freight train. I believe repetition creates memory, he said. And memory creates behavior. She did not publish the interview. When Ivan died, there was no obituary, only a box of old timetables found in his apartment. One page was marked heavily, a note written in the margin, shaking but clear. Lines are not neutral. They remember intent. Today, railway manuals include a phrase no one claims to have written. If a line resists without mechanical cause, halt operations. It is treated as safety protocol. But among veterans, it is understood differently. The quiet belt did not vanish. It decentralized. It stopped being a place and became a principle. Wherever war tried to move itself too efficiently, wherever people were reduced to cargo, wherever disappearance became policy, the line listened. Sometimes at night, operators report hearing a bell through static, not a warning, not an alarm, a signal of acknowledgement. No one speaks of conductors anymore. But trains still slow, rails still hum, and somewhere between departure and arrival, the war is occasionally delayed, denied, because some paths exist not to carry us forward, but to stop us when we are going somewhere we should not reach.